There we go. How's that?
Oh, Katsurish.
Hey,
How you doing?
We're amazing. How are you, Phil?
how you doing, Phil?
Fantastic, as always. Good, good.
Great.
Now, what is beautiful in your world?
What is beautiful in my world?
Yeah.
Most everything, my friends. Life is just good, you know. I've got a beautiful family, and my life is, I'm blessed, man. You know, I walked out of jail a little over 5 years ago with nothing, and here I am today with a beautiful life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think was for you in going from zero to living in a world where everything is beautiful? What was the biggest piece of advice or mantra or something that stuck that you kept going back to kept you on that right path?
Yeah, I think for me was I found this sense of purpose. I was lucky enough to meet up with a group of folks that were starting a nonprofit to open a recovery center in the town I live in Laconia. And just by circumstance, or really by advocating for myself, I was trying to get services for myself when I got out of jail, and I couldn't find out. I needed some mental health services. I needed some substance use services. I needed a PCP and all of that stuff. And I, for the first time in my life, found myself on Medicaid. And navigating that system was really, really frustrating trying to find services. So I reached out to the mayor of Laconia and asked for a sit down, and I did. And I went through my whole story, kind of like, my background and my struggles. And I was just like, how does somebody like me get well in this town? And he's like, I don't know. So I got a little upset, and I started to really ask a lot of questions and kind of advocate. And I got hooked up with these great people that were starting this recovery center. And, for the first time in my life, I was going to these meetings, and, I wasn't really participating. I was just kind of observing and all of that. And all of a sudden they started to ask for my input. I was one of only two people in the room that were actually in recovery, and the only one that had, been incarcerated. And so they started to ask for my opinion, and they really valued my opinion. And I think for the first time in my life, I felt like I had this sense of purpose, and I felt like my voice mattered and people were actually listening. And from there, it just changed everything for me, man. It got me involved in, going down to Concord and advocating for, for justice reform and for substance use disorder funding, and that frustrated me because it seemed like nobody was listening. And one of the guys that happened to be on the board of directors of this nonprofit, and that's the other thing that happened. They asked me to be the vice president of the board of directors of the nonprofit. And I was like, wait a minute, do you realize who you're talking to here? But, so one of them was a sitting state senator. And so I'd go back and I'd complain to him about nobody listening in Concord. And he said, hey, listen, man, you don't get to complain. Like, if you want to change things, you need to do something. And I'm like, well, I'm doing everything I can. And he said, no, you're really not. And I think, what do you mean by that? And he said, run for office. And I was like, man, I am a tattooed ex-heroin junkie who just got out of jail a year and a half ago. Like, what are you, crazy? Nobody's going to vote for me. And he said, run for office. So I did. And no one was more surprised than I was when I won. I won a House seat in 2018. And, I had come out really before filing to run. I sat down with the local newspaper, and I told them my whole story. Like, I didn't want any skeletons in my closet that anybody could use against me. Like, I just put it all out there. And anyway, so I won that seat. And, was another turning point where, like, you know what, like, I can make a difference. I deserve to have a life that, that I didn't think was available to me. Like, I can attain these things. And so anyways, I ended up running for Senate. The guy who was my mentor, that sitting state senator, he became the mayor of Laconia, and because he had lost his Senate seat. So I ran for his same Senate seat in the last election. I lost, but I didn't lose by much. So I'm going to do it again in 2022. But along the way, I got empowered. I was able to help people. I started sober houses. I got involved in working in treatment. All of those things, man. Right? Like it was me being connected to the community and finally being a contributing factor to the community rather than the guy that was taking from the community on a regular basis. So that's not really a short answer to your question, but really that's how it happened for me, man. So.
And it was beautiful listening to you tell your story, because it sounds like one of the things that really kicked off was having the confidence to be able to share your life and your experiences. And then once you were doing it with the newspaper, it blew up a whole different avenue where people could reach out and connect with you.
Most definitely. What I found when I was campaigning and knocking on doors is that people were pulling me into their living rooms and they were telling me their own stories or stories of their loved ones. And, as I was walking out the door, they were just like, Phil, just want you to know, like, you give us hope. And I was like, wow, right? Like, I didn't care after that. I didn't care if I won the election. I didn't win the election. I had already won because I was giving them hope. Awesome.
What would you tell yourself the first time you were going through?
Yeah, I think for me, like the biggest thing was just to own my past, right? Not hiding from it, not being ashamed of it, any of those things. Sorry, I'm sitting in an outside cafe. I was on the road for work. And the thing is, right, like, is finding a way to empower yourself with your past. So instead of your past being that thing that holds you back, like, have your past be that thing that propels you forward. Because there are so many people that have not lived that type of life, that cannot completely understand what it takes to survive that, number one, and number two, to make it to the other side where you're now doing something positive and you're really trying to make a difference. Like, own that, because people love that, right? Everybody loves Rocky, right? Like the underdog story, man. But you have to own it in order for them to join on with you. Because if they feel like you're being evasive or you're minimizing or any of those things, I find that they become mistrustful of you. But if you just own your shit, man, and you're just like, yeah, that's it, man. But here I am now. Like, this is what I believe in. This is what the difference I'm trying to make. Like, those kinds of things, I think are extremely powerful. I think the most important thing for you to do is to get out in the community as much as you can. I don't care if it's the Lions Club, the Rotary Club, the whatever civic organizations that are out there. Like, get those are the kinds of people that are engaged in the community that will help to get other people on board, right? There's organizations like the Kent Street Coalition. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. They do a lot of activism in the community. That would be somebody else that I would reach out to. Man, look, it's super exciting. I had never run for anything, not even like in high school or any of that stuff.
Me either.
I never ran for a single thing before I ran my first house race. And, it's just really important. You're doing the right thing. Ask questions. Ask the other state reps. Like, try and get some feedback from them and some help. Like, I lived, in my district for quite a while, but when I started to run for office, I realized there were so many other issues that were important to other people that I didn't really understand. So the more information I could gather, the better. Because you can't be like a one horse or whatever, the one pony show, or whatever that saying is, right? Like, you can't just run on one issue and expect that everybody's going to jump on board. Like, you got to educate yourself on the other issues and figure out which ones are important to you as well. That will help also garner more support for you.
When someone doesn't know you, period, you're meeting like for the first time, how do you introduce yourself and tell the story of you?
I always talk about the fact that I'm a person in long-term recovery from drugs and alcohol. It's just part of who I am and part of my introduction, Marty Walsh, who is now working for Joe Biden, President Biden, now as a labor secretary. He was the mayor of Boston, and I was watching him in the 2016 Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, and he stood up and he said, "Hi, my name's Marty Walsh, and I'm an alcoholic." And I was just like, this guy's at the Democratic National Convention. You know, millions of people are watching this at home. Thousands are there. And so it's kind of, you know, I don't just come right out and say, "Hey, I'm Phil, I'm an alcoholic," but it has become part of the way that I introduce myself, because I think it's important that people know I've never hidden from it. I never want to feel like I have to hide from it. Sometimes it doesn't, you know, it doesn't bode well for me, but you know, but when I am talking to people, I tell them I'm a former state representative, also a person in long-term recovery from drugs and alcohol, a community activist. I've done lots of work in my community, and you know, I talk about, you know, when we're talking about prison and jail reform, like I talk about my time incarcerated, and I let people know that. So for me, like, I had to own everything and every bit of who I am, because I felt like, not only so people couldn't use it against me, but because I felt like I just wouldn't, I couldn't carry that around. I couldn't carry around the lies or the guilt, because I did that for too many years. So now it's just like, hey, I'm who I am. Take it, leave it, like it, love it.
Exactly.
It's just the way it is, man, you know? And I think most people really respect that, because, and I always said, like, I'm the most honest politician you'll ever meet in your life, man. Like, I've told every dark secret in my history, all right, up front, man, right? I don't have to wait till I become a U.S. senator to find out that I did this or that or the other thing. Like, these guys have been running and hiding from it for years. Like, I just, my stuff's there, and I own it, and I'm not ashamed of it, and I take full responsibility for every action that I ever done. But I also take full responsibility for where I am now and how I got here.
It's really powerful, because it I think all too often it's really easy for us to take responsibility for the person we were, and a lot of us neglect to take the next step, which is to also to take credit for all the good things that kept you alive through that period of time, that
Absolutely.
that you can start to build a reserve from, to tell the story of who you are through that time, so that you can still connect and say, look, there's a lot of folks that didn't make it to this end or nearly as far, and let me now give my own thanks to myself of how I got here, but also to start realizing your talents from that time, so that you can actually build upon them in the world that you're in now.
Most definitely. And I think there's a lot of us that, you know, that were incarcerated or suffered from substance use disorder, that feel like we don't deserve anything in life. Like, we feel like because of what we've done, and the only way to prove to them that they do is to show them that it's possible, man.
It's
right?
possible.
Like, I want them to see me and be like, wow, okay, if this guy isn't anything special, he's not that bright, but he got, you know, he was able to do all this stuff. Like, why can't I? You know? The really important thing, man, is telling your story. And I'm going to tell you, that's the biggest thing that I learned was that by telling my story, it made so many connections, right? Like, think about the divisiveness right now in this country, and what has happened, you know, in the previous 4 years. People are looking for someone to be vulnerable, to be honest, to that they can really connect you on a human level. I believe that's my belief. That's why I do what I do, because I think that people want to feel connected to another human being, and especially another human being that has suffered the way that they have suffered. The runs for Senate and House, it wasn't about winning that seat so much as it was having a bigger platform to tell my story, so others could hear it, so others could be inspired, so others could heal. So that's my thing, right? Like, right? It's not about whether you win or lose that election. It's about you getting your story out there and helping people. However God intends you to help people, whether it's just you out there telling your story on the campaign trail, or if it's you sitting in one of those really uncomfortable seats in the House of Representatives for 8 hours and 9 hours at a time, then so be it, right? But either way, what you're doing isn't going out there and trying to sell people on an idea. You're out there telling them your story so they can also heal. One of the things that I think will transcend the race thing is your story, right? Because it doesn't matter, just like you said about addiction, don't matter black, white, Chinese, it doesn't matter, that it affects everybody. Well, these stories are things that have affected everybody. It doesn't matter the color of their skin or how they grew up or where they grew up, right? Like these are the things that make the connections. And people don't see color when you're being real and you're being honest about and you're being vulnerable and you're all of those things, right? Like people that are gravitate towards that. It doesn't matter, you know. And look, I live in a very pretty white area. Laconia is a pretty white area, but my partner and I, we adopted a little girl from Kenya, and you know, she's growing up in that world, and you know, but we have empowered her to own who she is right from a very young age, and she's so proud of who she is and so comfortable in her own skin that, you know, those are the kind of things that matter. You know, it's I don't know. She is the most amazing little girl that I've ever met. She has got more understanding and more security in herself than I had until I was. Hold on, sorry. Until I had, until I was in my 40s. Oh man, this has been fantastic. I'm so excited to get hooked up with you guys, man. You guys these are the kind of things that just really get me going, man. Like this is important work. This is
Yes.
this is a group of guys that have a lot of passion and compassion in what you're doing, man. And I'm so glad that Adam told me about this and I got a chance to meet you guys, because I'm all in. Whatever I can do for you guys, all of you, I am 100% on board with this.
One of the things that we are pushing for this year is to have a center in New Hampshire,
Okay.
likely in Manchester, because what we want is the ability for anybody that has been incarcerated to have a place where they can check in with somebody to just get started back on that path. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
An intake process to figure out, what do you need? Your social security card, your driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
What do you need to start the process of becoming a whole person? And then have a place where when they're like, okay, I need to do a job interview, I need to put on a suit. And also where we're going to teach folks how to tell their stories and do exactly what we've all been doing.
Absolutely.
Learning how to own what you have and then stand on top of it, but then how to convey that in a job interview setting, how to talk with your kids and tell them, you know, you don't have to tell them the whole truth about the things you've done, but how do you share with them enough so that they can talk about you in their lives? We would love to start having conversations with folks like the folks on this call and have panels where we start giving people an opportunity to start talking about the things they want to see in the community, to start basically a large listening session. The fact of the matter is, incarceration and drug addiction touches everyone in the community.
Most definitely.
And so it's not about just this is that next phase of life. So many folks get into incarceration or into drugs because it's an easy way to deal with your consciousness because of the things going on in your life. You don't want to be that conscious too. So you're figuring out a way to either deal with it, either by erasing it or by involving yourself in criminal activity that allows you to either make money or change the way you feel in a state.
Correct.
So what we have to do is to give people ways to spend their time in a productive fashion that they can feel like their purpose is starting to feel met. Because for a bunch of their life, they didn't have a purpose. Right. They were just a vessel for, they were a meat suit that were walking around aimlessly doing whatever just kind of came into their path. And so now we have to give them new ways to encounter all of those things that were in the world. And the best way to do that is with folks, as you already know, in recovery, of doing basically a lot of what you're doing in recovery, but in recovering of the societal challenges that you have.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those things. So I own men's sober houses. I've got a couple of houses where I house about 18 guys who are in recovery, and those are a lot of the same challenges. And a lot of them come out of jail or prison to the sober house, and those things like no driver's license. When you don't have a driver's license, you can't go apply for a job, because if you get the job, they're going to want your driver's license, your social security card, all of that. Not to mention, New Hampshire still has the check the box if you're a felon on the application, which I tried to introduce legislation to get rid of that, and it got shut down for, I don't know, anyways. But a lot of those challenges. So, and the other real big challenge is housing for these guys. I talk to at least 2 or 3 guys a day that are in jail or prison, and looking for housing, looking for sober living, looking for any kind of housing, and it just doesn't exist, especially in this area. I mean, I don't know how much better it is in Manchester, but that's another consideration. And so I'm just spitballing, but if you're looking to do some sort of center, maybe you look at some sort of center with some just transitional housing aspect to it, to get guys, a short period of time where they can get settled and move on to the next thing.
If you need that extra guidance to give you the right path.
Yes, exactly.
And we're incorporating education and job training and communications, like to make you a better person, to give you new habits while you're hanging around with a bunch of people who have these habits already. So that you can learn how to be a better person, not by people preaching it, but by being in the same space with people who are just living it.
Most definitely.
What's been the model that's worked best for you in your sober living homes?
Yeah, so it's mostly giving these guys structure, right? Holding them accountable and giving them structure. And what I'm finding is there's a lot of these guys that don't, they've never made their beds before. They don't know how to cook other than a frozen pizza. They've never done a job interview. They've never filled out a job application. They don't know how to dress to go to a job interview. So these are the kinds of things that we work with them on. We teach them. We have other guys in the house who become their role models, right? Guys that have been there longer. It's really, it becomes a brotherhood. It really does. It's these guys look out for each other. They can tell when somebody's falling off the beam, and get them back on the beam pretty quickly in most cases. And they just, they help each other out with rides to job interviews. They'll lend each other clothes to go to that job interview, those kinds of things, man. But it's really about just having a group of guys that have a common purpose, right? They're all there to figure out really what we should have learned from a young age, right? And that's living life on life's terms. But we just were never any good at that. So we have to learn that. And the only way you learn that is to be around other people that have learned it, right? Amen. I could tell you about it all day long and talk you to death, but until you see me actually doing it, does it really matter?
What was it that helped you lock in the good change for yourself as opposed to the life that you were living before?
I think that when I really just finally realized that I could not think my way out of these situations. I used to think that I was smarter than most people, and I could figure it out. Like I had these great plans, and like what could possibly go wrong? And next thing I know, I'm in handcuffs, right? But so when I got out and I started to do this, I just addressed every issue that I thought I may or may not have. Like I went to see a psychiatrist, I went to see a therapist, I went to see a primary care doctor. Like I did all of those things, which are, physically a good thing to do, health-wise. But mentally, I needed to find somebody to teach me how to live as a man because I did not know. So I would find these guys and I would watch them. And it was even like really without even talking to them. I would, I went to 12-step meetings, so it was a good place to find these kinds of guys. And I would just watch what they did, and I would watch how they talked to people outside of those meetings. And then I would start to approach them and ask them questions. But mostly I just got in their back pocket and I learned how to live like a good human being. And that's really, I needed somebody to show me because I couldn't figure it out. Just couldn't. It was impossible for me to figure out. And so, by seeing these men be examples of good human beings who actually cared about other people, and seeing how easy it really was, like you just be honest and all of your affairs, right? Like you care. When you ask somebody, hey, how you doing? You stick around and you wait for the answer because maybe they need to talk to somebody right at that moment, right? Like that, just engaging with other human beings and knowing that I had value was the key to all of that. Because if I didn't think I had value, then no one was going to want to hear what I had to say anyways. And so what was the point? And so, yeah, it was just really a mentor. Like I say it all the time, like everybody needs a mentor. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you've been. Like everybody needs somebody to help you walk down that path. And thank God, like they came into my life.
Have you ran into any organizations that help decarcerated individuals or any individuals with those life administrative tasks like driver's license, DMV, or wrapping up any old court cases so that a person can go back in life and live back as a whole free person with all those things intact?
Unfortunately in New Hampshire, there really aren't very many or any organizations that are tasked specifically with that. I mean, I know that like some of the recovery centers, like Hope in Manchester will occasionally have some funding to be able to help people like that. I know there are some through the state that but they're very few and far between. It's one of the things that I've really been trying to explore and find ways to be able to help, because these are some of the biggest barriers initially for folks that are decarcerated, is that they get out and the jail doesn't help them apply for their driver's license when they get out of there, or they may have had one when they went in but it ended up lost somewhere in the facility, or those types of situations. And the only thing they come out with is their inmate paperwork, and that's not acceptable. So as far as organizations go, I really don't know of any specifically that will help. I know that there are in my area, we use things like St. Vincent de Paul, which is a small church organization that has like a food pantry, and they'll help folks get work boots for a job or help them get their driver's license. But it's a case-by-case basis. But we really do need something like that where folks know, okay, I'm getting out tomorrow, I'm going down to whatever it is, right? They're going to help me get my driver's license. I'm going to get my life started again. Because what ends up happening is the frustration and the roadblocks lead them back to their old lifestyle, right? Exactly. Because that's an easier way to get some quick money, to get what they need, because nobody wants to help. And that's what we want to avoid. Thank you guys so much. This has been awesome.